Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. Do you want to become a better shooter, reduce flinch, protect your ears, and just overall enjoy shooting your gun that much more? Then there's no better way to do that than by adding a suppressor to the end of your barrel. Be sure to check out Huxwrx Safety Co, as they are a leader in the suppressor world with their OSS Flow-Through Technology, virtually eliminating blowback and toxic gas that can affect weapon system performance and shooter health. To find out more about Huxwrx, go to huxwrx.com. That's huxwrx.com, and go get yourself a suppressor for your upcoming hunts. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by OnX Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is OnX Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, OnX Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust OnX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about OnX, go to onxmaps.com/hunt. and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. All right, guys, if you're in the market for optics, I want you to go check out blackdiamondoptics.com. Black Diamond Optics offers world-class sporting and tactical optics, including thermals, all at wholesale pricing, direct to consumer. They are going to be partnering up with us for 2023, and I want to start pointing you over towards their direction. Check out Black Diamond Optics. If you've got any questions about it, shoot us a message. Love to hear from you. Be blessed, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and tonight I am joined by a pretty awesome dude who I met at the Dallas Safari Club convention back in, I believe it was the end of December. And when I saw this booth, I was like, I need to go there, because when it comes to shooting, when it comes to ammunition, when it comes to the actual item that touches your predator, your prey, your quarry, whatever it is, it really makes a difference. And that for me has always been Hornady ammunition ever since the day that I first picked up my first AR and started coyote hunting back in like 2015 or so. And so from that point on, I've always shot Hornady, kind of like when I drank Coors Light for the very first time, and that was the beer that I always went to. And so now I drink Coors Light because it was the first one. Well, Hornady ammunition has always been something that has stood out to me, and their products have performed very well. And from the beginning of time till now, bullets don't change that much, but yet technology does. We're going to dive into that a little bit with the marketing communications manager, Seth Swerczek from Hornady, and talking all about hunting, bullets, and so much more. Seth, thank you so much for joining me, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Johnny. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I sure appreciate it.
Oh, absolute pleasure, brother. It's always a pleasure. Podcasting is phenomenal because you get to make these connections with people, and it just like opens doors. And life is always about who you know, not what you know, apparently. So at least that's what I've been told.
I've heard that before.
So Seth, you have been doing the podcast. You're the host of the Hornady podcast.
Yeah, it's been fun. We've been just over a year now.
What's it like being a podcast host?
Well, I mean, as you know, it's a lot more work than what you think it is. You know, we basically, when I started into marketing, we got the green light. Hey, start a podcast.
Yeah.
Well, okay. What does that mean? So we figured it out, me and a couple other guys on the marketing staff, and it's just been really cool. You know, you get all of the different perspectives and you get the long form conversation. You can really dive deep on some topics. So for us, a lot of those topics are external ballistics or internal ballistics or bullet drag or bullet performance or bullet and cartridge design. It's just been a lot of fun. But again, The cool thing is you have a podcast every week. And the bad thing is you have a podcast every week. So, there's been a lot of weeks where it's like, I don't know what to talk about this week. What do we do? But you know what? It's been a lot of fun. And when we go to the shows, like where I met you at the Dallas Safari Club, or right now I'm at the NRA show or SHOT Show or any of those shows, it's cool to have people come up that, hey, I listen to you every week and I love topics about and fill in the blank. So it's pretty darn rewarding and it's been a lot of fun.
Right. Dude, I'll tell you, you being the host at Hornady, you probably don't edit podcasts.
I don't edit them physically, no. And we've only got 3 of us involved with the podcast. We've got me, the kind of the host, and then we've got 2 videographers, both of which are incredibly well-rounded as far as ballistics and cartridge knowledge and that kind of thing. And they do the majority of the editing. And yeah, they bear a heavy burden.
I tell you, every Sunday night I release my podcast. And by the way, this podcast is going to be going out this coming Monday here very shortly. But every Sunday night, if I don't get all my duties done throughout the week and get it edited and ready to go by Thursday night, I'm like, well, here we go. I guess it'll be a late night Sunday because I got to make sure this is ready to rock in the morning.
Yeah, buckle in. People don't quite understand the level of effort that it takes to put together. Anybody can hit record and just publish it, but when you want to make sure that your podcast is easy to listen to and well edited, it just takes that little bit of extra effort.
Yeah, totally. Well, brother, what's your history just in general? I mean, how did you end up working at Hornady? What did you do before that? What's your history in hunting and shooting? And lay it out for us.
So I grew up, I was born at a very young age, as they say. I grew up in central Nebraska, and where I grew up in Nebraska, to the west of me was an area called the Sand Hills.
Yeah.
Known, obviously they're hills literally made of sand and like 10 to 18 inch tall prairie grass. You're not growing crops there. You're not doing nothing there. It is cattle grazing, period. And that's called the Sand Hills, a very beautiful part of the state. And then to the east of me was the traditional Midwestern type of Nebraska, where you've got some canyons and some trees and some cedar draws and river bottoms and stuff like that. So I grew up right in that ecotone, which was a pretty awesome place to grow up. And my dad was an outdoorsman, and I was the youngest of 3 kids. And before I was born, he owned a gun shop, and he started hunting in the 70s. And stacked up a lot of whitetail. And we were really on the far eastern edge of where the mule deer live in Nebraska. So I grew up out there on the prairie, just with a Ruger 1022 getting after it. When I was about 11 years old, my dad bought me a Ruger M77 in 257 Roberts. And that was my first year that I was able to go deer hunting. And I fell in love with it because my dad was in love with it and my uncles were in love with it. And so my dad was his parents were from Poland, and they had 17 kids. 16 of them survived to adulthood. So I had a lot of aunts and a lot of uncles and a lot of cousins. And so for us, hunting was very much a culture. And then on my mom's side, that side was largely from Denmark and a little bit of German. And they hunted as well. So just grew up surrounded by people who were passionate about hunting, and not necessarily just like hunting for like mature bucks, but like they fed their families with deer meat. Right. So I grew up in that environment, and I was immersed in it. So I grew up shooting a 257 Roberts, running around the countryside, shooting coyotes and prairie dogs and deer and whatever else I could find. And that's what captured me. And when I was in high school, my dad had a .308 Winchester, and I remember I shot a milk jug at 600 yards with this .308 Winchester. And from that point, I was probably 14 or 15. I was just blown away at long range shooting as an idea. Like, oh my gosh, that was so cool. How do I do that? So I was kind of hooked at that point, and we hunted a lot and grew up, like I said, very rural, and was an athlete in high school, just as most small town kids are, and had the opportunity to pursue some of those athletics post college. But I knew I wanted to serve, kind of felt that calling. So I did some time in uniform as a reservist and played football in college and did a deployment overseas in Afghanistan and came home and finished my last year or my last semester rather of college. And at that point, I'd really identified, man, I have to work in the hunting and shooting world. I have to do it. That's what I got to do. This whole time, I started to reload when I was 13. I didn't know Hornady was in the same universe as me. But I knew I reloaded Hornady 117 grain bullets in my 257 Bob. They were 70 miles from my hometown. I had no idea. So when I
Really?
graduated college, it was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? That's the Lord's sign right there. So I
Yeah.
applied for a job as a technical representative and took about 2 months to get the job, but I eventually got the job at Hornady. So my first real job out of college, outside of the Marine Corps, was at Hornady, and I've been there ever since. I've worked in technical service, which is a pretty broad spectrum kind of department that talks to our direct consumer on products, how to use them, how to reload, what bullets to use for what application, long range shooting, different shooting competitions, and customer service stuff. And then I worked as a ballistic engineer for a few years, and then this job opportunity came open in marketing. And our vice president, Jason Hornady himself, said, "Seth, I'd really like if you consider applying for this position." So with that friendly nudge, I applied, and now I sit as the communications manager. It's been
Dude,
a pretty good ride.
that is quite a story, brother. I mean,
Yeah.
let's just go back to the beginning for a second. What's up, Soul Seekers Nation? Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. As a reward, I have some discount codes for you to use if you are in the market for a brand new hunting pack. Go check out initialascent.com and Initial Ascent packs. They are made in America. Their one-piece carbon frame is an absolute game changer. We run their packs. We love them. And you can save 5% at checkout by using the code SOULSEEKERS. That's all one word. Also, for those of you who are archery hunters and you are tired of shooting at dots on a target, check out deadnutsoutdoors.com for their lifelike 2D archery targets. You can save 20% on all of their products by using the code SOULSEEKERS at checkout. Once again, the code is SOULSEEKERS, all one word. Go check out initialascent.com and Dead Nuts Outdoors. Enjoy the podcast. I don't think I've ever met anybody whose first rifle was a 257. Like that, like
Yeah.
what was your dad thinking getting you that caliber,
Well,
that chambering?
Dad always loved the 250 Savage and the 25-06.
Yeah.
And Hornady and Ruger have always had a really good relationship. And in the early 90s, Ruger agreed to, make some rifles in 257 Bob, and Hornady made some ammo. And at the time, it was light Magnum from Hornady, 257 Roberts. And so, that was, in I forget what year, it would have been 98 probably, 1998. Dad got me the 257. He's always a fan of the 25 cal, and he just needed to add that 257 Roberts to the lineup. And it was a perfect recoiling round for a young kid, at the time, I don't know, 11 years old. I forget, but I was probably 5'5", 110 pounds or
Yeah.
something. It was just a perfect cartridge for me.
Man, that is wild. Do you still shoot it by chance?
I still have it. It doesn't shoot particularly well, to be honest with you. It shoots about a 2 minute, 2.25 minute, as best as I've ever got out of it as a serious, as a professional, air quotes now. Doesn't shoot that well. So I've got 2 sons, and I'll probably build them. I'll probably do like a Wildcat, do like a 25 Creedmoor, make sure it shoots really well.
Yeah.
But I still have the rifle. It's got the same Leupold Vari X2 2-8 on there. And it's killed, honestly, everything I've ever pointed it at. So I can't blame the inaccuracy on anything. It's just, it doesn't shoot that well. But yes, I still have it.
That is so awesome. That talk about family heirloom. Your kids, son, one day when you have children, this gun was passed down from.
Yeah, and I'll do it too, honestly.
That's epic. Dude, what position did you play in college football?
you can't tell it. You're looking at me. I think your listeners will only listen. I was a lot bigger back in the day, but I was recruited as a running back, and that lasted like 2 whole days of summer camp, summer camp when I was in college. I got moved to strong safety, and then my sophomore year, we moved from a 4-3 defense to a 3-4.
Uh-huh.
So I was moved from strong safety down to outside linebacker. And I was about 210 pounds. I'm 5'10", so about 210 pounds at the time. And I played outside linebacker on the weak side. So I was outside the box, mostly in coverage, but just where they put the slow white guys.
Yeah, running with those slot receivers, just having fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good time.
So I also played college football. I was a quarterback.
Okay. Yeah.
Division II up at Central Washington. But
Yeah.
man, it's very funny how many people within the hunting industry actually were college athletes.
Dude, it's small. And I was way smaller than that. I was a medium-sized fish in an extra small pond. So in the Midwest and in the Plains area, we have the NAIA.
Yep.
We play a lot of like Division III schools. I had some Division II opportunities to play baseball, but football was just cooler, I guess. No regrets. It was a good time.
Right? Football's freaking awesome, man. I love it. Big fan, NAIA. Actually, Central Washington, where I went, won the NAIA national championship before they went to Division II.
Nice.
Back early on. Do you guys remember John Kitna, the quarterback? He played quarterback for the Seahawks or Cowboys for a while. Yeah, so he was a quarterback at Central Washington. So he's
no kidding.
Yeah, back when they won the national championship. Pretty wild.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So ever heard of Initial Ascent backpacks?
Initial Ascent.
Yeah.
Rings a bell, but I can't picture them.
They're out of Middleton, Idaho. They're one of our sponsors, and they make phenomenal packs. But one of their founders, he played corner down at Southern Florida, and so I always talk to him like, man, we could get quite an amazing game of 7-on-7 going if we get all the crew together.
Yeah, you probably could.
Pull some hamstrings and
back
to our wives and kids.
I'm 34. I'm in good shape, but not that good.
There's the saying, either you leave the game or the game leaves you, right? At some point, it's best to watch.
Yeah, right.
So I love it. Well, brother, let's dive into ammunition. And then I want to get into your hunting stories and your journey as a hunter and what it's done for you as we progress. But very first thing that I want to bring up is, as newer hunters, because this podcast touches a lot of newer hunters, what information, 101 type stuff. I always thought a bullet was a bullet, right? It's meant to shoot. It's meant to kill. That's what bullets do. That's what guns do. And so when it comes to hunting, there's a lot of education to know, but sometimes it feels like you're drinking from a fire hose, and that's not enjoyable, right? No one loves getting pounded in the face with information, be like, I can't digest all this. And so here I was, my very first hunting rifle was 308 Winchester in an AR-10 platform. Because I started out as a Second Amendment believer, so I, bought a pistol, had a rifle, had a 22 long rifle plinker, but my AR platform was the first rifle that I started shooting, because I got into coyote hunting first, and I was coaching high school football, and so the falls were like, how do I navigate big game hunting when I'm trying to break down film and scout and do all this other stuff? And so I was like, man, I'm getting an AR-10. This is back when, AR-10s are really popular nowadays, but they were on the expensive side of things at the beginning. And I was like, dude, I can get an AR platform in a hunting caliber. Yes, I'm in.
Yeah, sign me up.
Yeah. So at the time, it was, I always kind of considered, when it came to big game hunting, like, get the heaviest bullet for your caliber possible, or relatively within that range. And that's something that you can address also. But I was shooting 168 grain AMAXs, because I also started to reload, and I didn't really understand the difference. I was shooting VMAXs first because I shot coyotes and varmints, but then I was like, oh, VMAX, AMAX, it looks the same. I'll go with this. And so I shot my very first big game animal was a black bear, 9 miles deep in the backcountry of the state of Washington. All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode. As a thank you, I got more discount codes for all of you. If you are in the market for anything in regards to calls, whether it's elk calls, turkey calls, deer or predator calls, you can save 15% on all Rocky Mountain hunting calls by using the code SOULSEEKERS. That's all one word. And if you're in the market for hard side hydration, a better way to hydrate, go check out hardsidehydration.com. Use the code SOULSEEKERS10 to save 10%. And we also have a discount at Graxaw.com. That is, Graxaw is the leader in ultralight game bags and other backcountry gear. Light, fast, and efficient is their motto. Use the code SOULSEEKERS, all one word, to save 10% at checkout.
Beautiful.
And with 168 grains, I chased this black bear down in Birkenstocks because I have a little granola in me every now and then. I like to bridge the gap between hugging trees and shooting animals.
Yeah.
But I shot this black bear at 30 yards, and this is the remnants of my 168 grain VMAX.
Yep.
And I think last time I weighed it, maybe a little under 40 grains of pretty much just copper is left.
Yep.
A little bit of lead. And at that point I was like, that didn't retain very much weight. Where did all that impact and power go? Just like it blew up inside the bear. And from that point on, I was like, maybe I'll look into what bullets do a whole lot more. You hear about bonded, non-bonded, jacketed, all these different things. So with that being said, why don't you just go through the basics of bullets and talk to our listeners about why they can choose certain ammunition or bullets for the specific game that they're pursuing.
Yeah, sure. Well, what you experienced is exactly what I would expect. If you hunt with a match style bullet like an ELD match or an AMAX, so there's a lot that goes into bullet construction. So largely, all cup and core is what we kind of call them generically. Cup and core bullets start the same, and they start with copper strip that shows up to our factory in maybe 50 thousandths thick, 20 thousandths thick, 30 thousandths. We got different thicknesses. And it comes through a punch processes that punches that copper into a disc. And then another punch hits that disc in the center and forms that disc into a cup. So it goes from flat stock to a cup. And those cups are what control, that's really how a bullet starts. And that's what helps control some of that expansion. So a really thin cup will have a really thin jacket. And that, like I said, is really the start of controlling how a bullet performs. But that's how we make all cup and core bullets, is that strip material of copper and zinc, which we get. We have a specialty material that we get as an alloy. Comes in, we form it into a cup. And then depending on the bullet diameter and the bullet weight, we'll cut lead that we melt in-house to go in the core of that. And each bullet, depending on how many, what features it has, whether it has a cannular or how long the ogive is or something like that, it'll usually between a 14 and 17 step process to run that bullet from a cup to a finished product. And what really differentiates a match bullet to a hunting bullet is the jacket thickness. So a match bullet, like an ELD match or an AMAX bullet, it will have a jacket thickness at the base, in the bow tail, and on the sides, and all the way up into the ogive. That's, say, 25 thousandths thick. You've got a jacket that's only 25 thou thick all over from the top to the bottom, very uniform, very thin. Where if you look at a hunting bullet, like our ELDX bullet is a great example, or an interlock or an SST, the base of that jacket will be, let's say, 50 thousandths thick. And the bearing surface will be 40 thousandths thick. And then as you get all the way up to the polymer tip, it'll be 20 thousandths thick. So a match bullet might be 20 or 25 thou thick through its entirety of that jacket, Whereas a hunting bullet will be really thick, doubly thick in some cases, 50 or 60 thousandths thick at the bottom, and then taper as it gets thinner towards the front of the bullet. What that allows is the impact speed to open the bullet up, but as the jacket material is thicker, the bullet starts to slow down and it will increase its penetration and hold more mass together. It will literally retain more weight because the jacket's thicker. It's resisting that expansion. You know, a prime example is exactly what you experienced with that 168. And then what we do is we have a feature called an interlock ring. In the early 70s, 1972 and 3, I think it was called the inner groove. And in 1974, it changed to the interlock. And that is a step inside the jacket. So imagine a bullet with no lead core, but the jacket, inside the jacket has a barb planted inside of it of copper. And when we smash the lead into it, that copper ring gouges into the lead and holds it together. So now as a bullet expands, you have a mechanical ring that tries to retain the lead core within the copper jacket. And so that's why you experience such really low weight retention, is because the lead core slipped out of the jacket. So with a hunting bullet, we have a different taper in the jacket. The jacket is thicker at the bottom and gets thinner towards the top. And we have a mechanical ring that holds that lead core into the jacket. And then as far as the presses go, the bullet presses are largely World War I and World War II era, very old Waterbury fur transfer presses. And in a 14 to 17 step process, they'll draw that jacket and they'll just take a punch and punch that material into a die. And every time you punch it, it gets longer and thinner. And you just transfer it over to the next station and you do the same thing. And you design and you fold in those boat tails and those ogives. And it seems like a very rudimentary process, but we can really create some pretty amazing bullet profiles for low drag or low expansion or high expansion. We can really manipulate a bullet and how it performs just based on the draw process.
Man, that is so wild. That's pretty cool. What is an inner bond?
So an inner bond is a proprietary process where we use heat to essentially weld the jacket to the core. Now, that's really great in regard to terminal performance because the jacket and the core are now welded together. So you're going to get 90% weight retention or more in some cases once you fire it into an animal. Catch 22 with that is the bonding process requires a lot of heat, and heat will soften that bullet jacket. And a soft bullet jacket doesn't lend itself to accuracy. So the inner bonds are very difficult to make. Bonded bullets as a whole are difficult to make in extremely large volumes because of that. But that jacket and that core is essentially welded together through a proprietary heating process. That's what a bonded bullet is. They do retain weight like nobody's business. They hit like a hammer. For Hornady, our ELDX, which is a non-bonded bullet, and our CX, which is a monolithic bullet, between those two bullets, you can do everything a bonded bullet can do and then some. So that's why we don't do a ton of bonded bullets anymore. We still offer them a lot smaller scale. We just don't do a ton of them because those two different bullets, the ELDX and the CX, really bridge that gap nicely.
Interesting. Okay. So you just said a word, monolithic. For all the listeners who are like, okay, I don't want to get confused and cross-eyed on this. What is a monolithic bullet?
Monolithic just simply means mono, one individual homogeneous material. That's it. That bullet, the entirety of the bullet is made of a single homogeneous material. That's monolithic. And so for us, we use a 95% copper, 5% zinc alloy. It's not 100% copper because we can talk about why, but so it's an extremely high weight retention, really rugged bullet, great for punching shoulders, extremely deep penetration, lots of terminal performance that a lot of people have loved for years.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and talk. Why isn't it 100% copper? Number one, because of the price, because copper is expensive, or is
it? At the time that we designed our GMX bullet, which is now our CX bullet, copper prices really weren't all that high. We designed that bullet in 2008, 2009 timeframe. And what we found with pure copper is number one, it fouled, for lack of a scientific term, it fouled the ever living piss out of a barrel. It just was a lot of copper fouling. So by adding zinc to it, it made the material softer. So it would conform to the rifling without so much resistance and would deposit less copper in your barrel. So the copper zinc alloy really allows us to, one, foul your barrel less than pure copper. And then two, when you add zinc to copper, it makes a more lubrous material. So it's easier to manufacture. So it resists fighting the tools and dies, right? It just manufactures easier, fouls your bore less, and it still hits like a freight train. So it's a win-win.
Man, that's okay. That's good to know. It's very interesting because there's so many different bullet choices. What do you hunt with? What is your bullet choice?
And I hunt with the ELDX.
Okay.
Yep.
So
You can write that down in the history of the world. Seth Swerczek, I'm an ELDX shooter. I shoot matches with it and I hunt with it. The ELDX for me is the best of all worlds.
And so that came out about what, 2 years ago now? The EL or
No,
the brand?
ELDX bullets and ammo came out in 2015.
Has it been that long?
It's been that long.
Okay, so let's talk about it because that's actually what I shoot. I shoot the Hornady Precision Hunter, and I also one of the topics I want to get into is reloading ammo versus how accurate factory ammo is, because that's always a big debate. But the ELDX, I shot it because I was like, oh well, that's just Precision Hunter. Here we go. Like, that sounds like it's supposed to be the bullet that I choose, right?
Yeah, the name says it all.
Right. And so I've shot a few animals. I haven't shot any elk. I always archery hunt for elk, but I've shot some black bears and some deer with it. And it seems to me that the bullet hits hard and explodes like a grenade inside of the animal. That is my personal experience. So I want to hear what you think on this. Because it kills these animals that I'm shooting. But I'm also pulling out copper fragments on the backside of it and all that.
Yeah. So the ELDX is a very unique bullet. It was the first bullet ever designed specifically for this. We wanted this bullet to work everywhere. So before the ELDX, Jason Hornady, vice president of our company, was on a hunt, and he had some people hunting with him that happened to be in camp, but weren't with him, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
And they were shooting a competitor's product. It was a hollow point boat tail design that the company claimed was for hunting, but it was a hollow point boat tail in 30 cal. And they lost a couple animals with those bullets shot at extended range. And Jason came back and talked to our internal development team, our ballistics development group, and was like, guys, I don't care to hunt animals far away. Long range, quote unquote, long range hunting is not my thing, but people are doing it. And if they're going to do it, they need to have a good bullet for it. And they need to have a bullet that has a deliberate mechanical means for expansion, i.e. polymer tip, not a hollow point, because those don't reliably expand the same way every time. So our development team went off and ran with it. And what they ended up with was a polymer tipped bullet that upsets as low as 1,600 feet per second, which is remarkably low velocity, and will expand reliably and hold together up into the 3,000 feet per second mark, 2,800 feet per second mark, right? So you have a bullet that will do close range and long range. And that is huge. So when you take an animal at moderate range, say inside of 250 yards, where your velocity is the highest, that bullet, because it expands at low range, has a thin frontal portion of the jacket, but the jacket is double or 2.5 times as thick at the base. So it holds together on those close range impacts, but it still expands at the long range impacts. So hopefully that makes sense. The ELDX will fragment quite a bit at close range because you're impacting with all that velocity. The same design makes it expand if you take a 600-yard shot and still kill just as effectively as if you took a 60-yard shot.
So
Because
yeah,
people get hung up on energy, but energy is just a formula derived from velocity. Velocity is what makes bullets work.
Okay. So when I say mine exploded like hand grenades inside these animals, they were under 200 yards, the
Yeah.
deer. So,
Yep.
like, I ended up losing a little bit of meat on my whitetail because I just hammered that front shoulder. Like,
Yeah.
just there's nothing left of that shoulder blade, and
Yeah.
um, but it didn't go anywhere. I wasn't blood
We
trailing.
honestly, it's such a sticky widget, right? Like for me and mine and the way I hunt, I killed a giant mule deer this year on public land. 7 hours later, my dad killed another giant mule deer on public land. Dad's mule deer was less than 50 yards away from crossing the border into private property.
Wow.
Sometimes you have to take that shot on the shoulder blade. I would rather feed 7 pounds of bloodshot meat to my dog than have to figure out how to get that animal
Uh,
who's dead 50 yards on the other side of the fence.
yeah.
And that's my opinion, not everybody's. If you don't want bloodshot meat, you want to reduce it, a monolithic bullet like the Hornady CX or the Barnes bullet, that's the way to go. But for me, it's an easy trade-off.
Interesting. I like that. I like the concept. So the longest shot that I've killed and recovered an animal on was with the ELDX at 377 yards, and that was a black bear.
Yeah.
I punched it, and didn't hit front shoulder because black bears got to aim a little further back.
Mhm.
But it was, I mean, dude, it's a good bullet. I
Yeah.
haven't had any issues with it.
Yeah. You can kill anything with anything. You put a good bullet in the right place, animal's gonna die.
Yeah. So when it comes to this ELDX and because you guys run a lot of the commercials of like the first ever heat shield tip and all this
Yeah.
stuff, is that for real or is that just marketing?
No, that's a real legit thing. Obviously, you get a lot of marketing, oh, Hornady marketing, it's all market hype, whatever. I'll tell you what, we got like 8 dudes on our marketing team. We run a pretty lean ship. Do we market our products? Well, hell yes, we do. That's our job, right? To
Right.
market the products. The reality is that heat shield tip is legit. So when we first got our Doppler radar in 2014, we did testing was going on every single week. We are just testing. Excuse me, that started back in 2013. And with our polymer tips, not anybody else's, the Hornady bullets, the AMAX bullet and the SST bullet, we found that within a certain set of circumstances, which we can talk about, the polymer tip would degrade, change shape, and alter the drag of the bullet. And it was measurable. It wasn't just like, oh, it happens, but it's no big deal. It was measurable. And that was what led us to find a material that had a higher melt point, but could still be molded into the material to use for our tips.
So is that the same tip in all of the tip bullets, or is that
Not all of
specific
them.
to the ELD series?
So it's specific to the ELD match, the ELDX, and the CX. And the reason for that is to get a polymer tip to deform in flight, it had to have think of like a slide rule where you've got like a rule on your left and a rule on the bottom and a rule on the right. And if you move one, moves the other two.
Yep.
And those 3 slide rules are ambient air temperature, muzzle velocity, and ballistic coefficient.
Yeah.
So if a bullet had a significant BC, generally over a 0.5 G1,
Mm-hmm.
launched north of about 2,500 feet per second, and ambient air temperature of about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, it would deform in flight. Now, if you drop the temperature way low, you drop the drag, you drop the muzzle velocity, it just didn't happen
Yeah.
because the velocity degraded so quickly. So for like our VMAX bullets, they're so low BC, like the 55 grain 22 cal VMAX.
That's what
222.
I shoot. I love it.
Everybody shoots it, right? You can't drive that bullet fast enough to deform the tip and show up in its drag. Can you deform the tip? Sure, but it degrades velocity so fast that it just sinks like a stone. It doesn't hold on to that muzzle velocity long enough to deform the tip, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of a slide rule effect. So the SST and the VMAX bullets don't have that ELD match tip, the heat shield tip, because they don't benefit from it. We could put it in there. It would cost you, the consumer, more money, but you wouldn't get a better product. So the ELD match, the ELDX, and the CX are the ones that have it.
I got to just tell you right now, just from this is the benefit of hosting a podcast. I do it, quote unquote, for my listeners, but I'm sitting here being like, oh, okay, yeah, this is
right on.
This is exactly what I needed to know. Okay, so I will say the very first hunting bullet that I chose, now I killed the animal with the 168 grain AMAX, but when it came to hunting bullets, I selected the SST.
Yeah.
What is the SST? What's different about it? It has an interlock to it.
Yep.
And then what else is different about it?
So the first hunting bullet that Hornady manufactured was a 30 cal, 150 grain Spire point in 1949. And in the early 70s, they came out with the inner groove, which became our interlock bullet. And the interlock bullet with the exposed lead tip was just, I mean, if you were hunting in the 80s, that was the bullet, right? Well, we came out with these polymer tips in 1996 with our VMAX bullet, and it was just a natural progression to want to include it in a hunting bullet for big game. And what the polymer tip allows is a more streamlined design, higher BCs, and therefore higher impact velocities. So the SST is very much a carbon copy of our interlock bullet, the original interlock, where it's got a tapered jacket, it's got an interlock ring, it has a cannular groove wrapped around the bullet that allows the case mouth of the cartridge case to crimp into it, but it also holds the bullet together. So it works with the interlock ring. The interlock ring is on the inside of the bullet, the cannular groove's on the outside of the bullet, and together they squeeze that bullet together, and they have that polymer tip. And the polymer tip, as everybody knows, man, you drive that rearward into the bullet upon impact of an animal, and it basically makes that bullet hydraulically expand from the inside out. So you have rapid expansion. And if you're hunting black bear, mule deer, whitetail, and antelope, those thinner skinned, medium-sized game animals, you want a dead in their tracks kind of bullet. The SST, because of that rapid expansion, does really, really well.
So it's kind of like between the SST and the ELDX when it comes to choosing, but you keep leaning towards the ELDX.
I personally do, simply because of this. I want to say this without sounding pretentious, but like with my level of experience and my level of competitive experience and my competency as a shooter, I don't ever want to be hindered by shot distance on a game animal, especially on, like, when I do personal hunts on public land. If I see an animal at 400 yards or 500 yards, I want to make sure that the bullet's going to perform, because my ability to hit the target at 500 yards is pretty damn good. And again, not sounding pretentious, I train for that year round. And I have personally built firearms that I shoot 12 months a year to make sure I'm competent to shoot something at those non-traditional ranges. And I never want the bullet to be the limiting factor.
Okay, so you're painting a picture. I'm understanding. I'm going to share with the listeners a little bit my experience and why you guys choose what you choose. You just answered the question about why your muzzle loading bullets are the SSTs. So I shoot a 50 cal muzzle loader, and when it came to picking ammo for it, I was like, oh, Hornady makes them. Great. And so they're SSTs. Why? Because you're not shooting your muzzle loader out to 500 yards. You're going to be shorter and closer distances. So that, to me, that is like light bulbs on to why I'm going to choose certain bullets for certain applications. And and whatnot. So I like that. That makes sense. So like Western big game hunter definitely would be conducive to picking up a ELDX bullet. If you're shooting, 150 yards and under out of a blind in the cornfields or whatever, maybe the SST is more your style.
Yeah, the SST or the interlock, fantastic bullets. We sell millions of dollars worth of them.
Yeah.
But for the precision shooter, regardless of range, I'm not caught up in range. I'm caught up in precision. For the precision shooter, the ELDX bullet, man, they shoot to our match accuracy standard in the factory. And then they, like I said earlier, they just hit like a freight train. It just makes it easy.
So when we're talking about accuracy of factory ammunition,
Yeah.
what is the variable between what is precision for you guys and what isn't? Right. I'm sure
Yeah.
you get that quite a bit, or like,
Yeah. There's two things that separate the precision of factory ammo. And the first, I'm going to talk about traditional chambers, 270, 25-06, 308, 708, 243. The first is you have to have an accurate bullet. So I talked about making the cup for the bullet and then making the bullet out of that cup. The concentricity, or how perfectly circular the jacket is around the center line of the bullet, our jacket concentricity is less than 0.2. So that's the fourth decimal place, right? So 0.2 is as bad as our jackets can be and still be allowed to pass.
wow.
So everything has to start with a perfectly concentric bullet. And then from there, propellant. There are just some really easy propellants that just produce accuracy. I'm not a chemist. I don't understand necessarily why, but there are some propellants that produce really, really good accuracy. Now, moving over into like the real precision stuff, chamber geometry has a lion's share of the reason that certain cartridges are more accurate. So, on cartridges that Hornady designs, 6.5 Creedmoor, 204 Ruger, 17 HMR, all three of the PRCs, the 6mm ARC, all of these cartridges, the chamber geometry, not the cartridge, the chamber geometry, more specifically, the area in the throat, the diameter and the length of that throat are so hypercritical to accuracy. When we design a chamber, we specify those very specifically. And that allows us and allows every other manufacturer to make ammo that just plain flat out shoots. And that's why when you buy the $400 Ruger American or the $4,000 GA Precision rifle, but they're both chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor, you grab factory Precision Hunter or factory match ammo, they're both going to shoot calcified. And it's because of that chamber geometry. So when the gun manufacturers get a standard SAMI spec chamber reamer, it's to the dimensions that we specified that produce good accuracy with factory ammo.
Interesting. When it comes to the propellants,
Yeah.
gunpowder, do you guys always use the same stuff? And is it a secret? Like, are your loads secret to what you put in for your ELDX, for example? Because
Yeah.
I've tried my best at replicating whatever it is, because in case I couldn't find a box of ammo, I wanted to be able to reload it. Um,
Sure.
but is that a secret within the industry, or what? How's that go?
It's not necessarily a secret. In some instances, in a lot of instances, rather, we get to purchase propellant that is not commercially available.
Ah,
So there's a lot of stuff that you can't get as the reloader because you can't go to the store and buy it. So what good would it do for us to tell you what it was? There are some canister grade propellants that we do use, although the amount of those is pretty small simply because we're competing to buy it from the vendor, say Hodgdon, for example. We're competing with all of the retailers that want to sell it as a reloading component to purchase for us to use in the factory. So we've got some propellants that we do use in some loads. It's not always the exact same propellant for every item number, although we do try to do that. We do try to have a specific item number, use a very specific propellant every time we run that lot number. With recent COVID and the war in Ukraine, because a lot of that powder is manufactured in that neck of the woods, Sweden, Switzerland, Ukraine, etc. We have to sacrifice that a little bit, but we try to use the same propellant and the same item number simply for consistency.
Very good. That's great to know. I love that because I've always been, I've bought, go to the store, I see 4 boxes of Precision Hunter. Okay, that's what I'm going to get. But then the next time I go to the store, I see 2 boxes. Well, those aren't the same lot numbers. So are they going to be shooting the same? And am I making sure that I don't mix one box with another? Is that really going to make a difference? Or are you guys...
Yeah, it can. Depends on how far away you're shooting. Inside of 500 yards, certainly inside of 400 yards, it doesn't make as much difference as you would think. Quite honestly, this is completely anecdotal, but we kept a 45-pound barrel of powder. So it's probably 20 inches tall, 12 inches in diameter. Mm-hmm. That's the bucket size. We kept one of those propellant canisters full of cartridges. And when we shoot a test, let's say we're going to shoot a 5-shot sample. We'll actually take 7 rounds and we'll shoot 2 foulers and then the 5-shot test. Well, if that barrel is already fouled, we won't shoot the 2 foulers, but we still have the 2 extra rounds. So we would put the 2 extra rounds in the bucket of 6.5 Creedmoor. And eventually we ended up with this huge bucket of random 6.5 Creedmoor.
Huh.
And at 400 yards, you could take any round out of that barrel and put it onto a steel plate at 400 yards. It didn't matter if it was a 147, a 143, or a 140. Those are the 3 SKUs we kept. It didn't matter.
Really?
At 400 yards, you put them on a 6-inch plate. It didn't matter.
Okay.
But
listen, we want to make sure we're ethical when it comes to hunting and stuff like that. You want to make your best, but that's really
absolutely
good. That's really good to know. Like if you're in a pinch.
That was just, again, anecdotal, and we kept that ammo around so that we could like throw a scope on a lab gun and get it zeroed in real quick.
Yeah.
But the reality was it didn't matter. So should you do that? Absolutely not. But I'm saying at those ranges inside of 500 yards, if you're mixing lot numbers, not going to be the end of the world.
Gotcha. All right. So when we're talking about gunpowder and all that stuff, you have your Hornady makes Superformance ammo, and then Hodgkins has the Superformance powder. Do you guys do you load Superformance powder into your Superformance ammo? Is that what it is? Or is that marketing once again?
Yeah, well, a little bit of both. So the Superformance propellant that you can buy as a canister grade is one specific burn rate. And for our factory ammo, we've probably got nearly 24 burn rates of Superformance that we buy from the manufacturer. The manufacturer of that propellant sells us the 26 different burn speeds or whatever the number is. And they sell Superformance as a canister grade propellant, that one burn rate, to Hodgdon to market as a reloading component. So it is the same, but it's also only one of many that we get to use. So that's why we have like a Superformance in 204 Ruger, as well as a Superformance in 375 Ruger. So we've got huge spans. It's because we have, like I said, those non-canister grade propellants. Yeah. But where that propellant works, it flat out works, man. You want a hot rod of 270 or 30-06 or 25, anything on that 06 case, Superformance will get you there in a darn hurry.
This is good to know. I love it. All right, so I'm going to be, actually the whole Soul Seekers crew is working with Seekins Precision, and we're getting sent brand new Havoc elements this year in 7 PRC. Now,
never heard of it.
No, yeah, never. I have no idea what it is. So
Right.
this progression in the hunting world, right? You got your granddad's 30-06 because he came back from the war and it was 30-06 and that's what they shoot. And here it is just being a phenomenal round. You got 308 just because it's standard. You got you being an
Yeah.
outlier shooting 257. Um,
Yeah.
like, but at the end of the day, there are these core foundational calibers, chamberings that just kind of last the test of time. And now different companies are starting to push the envelope. And 6.5 Creedmoor took the man bun by storm, and everyone loves it or they hate on it, but they
They
hate to
love to hate it.
they love to hate it, hate to love it. Um, and I'm a proponent of short actions because
Sure.
I love shooting and I don't want to get beat up shooting. If I don't want to just pick up a hunting rifle and be like, well, this is my hunting rifle. I only shoot it to sight it in and maybe a
And
little,
look.
and to hunt. I want to
Yeah.
shoot my guns and I don't
Mhm.
want to just get pounded by long actions or magnums or all these things. And so I ended up choosing 308 originally because the AR platform. And I was like, oh, 6.5 Creedmoor. Sounds great. Like,
Yeah.
let's do it. So I went on the 6.5 Creedmoor train and have had a lot of success on it. That you see hunting forums are like, can a 6.5 Creedmoor kill a bear? Can a 6.5 Creedmoor kill an elk? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And now I'm to the point where I am ready for a larger caliber, long action, specifically
Yeah.
because um, I feel like I need to have one in my arsenal as a man. Like,
Sure.
like it's time to. I got hair on my chest. I got a beard. Like let's go. But when it came to calibers, I was like, okay, I think 7 mm PRC is what I want, even though I don't know why I want it.
Mhm.
But it sounds cool. That's a specific Hornady uh, caliber. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
All right. So talk a little bit about the PRCs and
Yeah.
just like the concept of them.
Sure. Well, not specific to the 7 PRC, but as the PRC family as a whole, a lot of it was there are hand loaders that are getting certain levels of performance from wildcat chamberings. And we benefit from that. As an engineer, as a ballistic engineer at Hornady, I had sky's the limit. I had a full ballistics lab to my arsenal. I could do, man, if I want to run a 6.5 284 and find the ragged edge of pressure, I could do that because I got a pressure barrel. So we benefited from running custom Wildcat guns. We build guns ourselves because we're passionate end users, right? Hornady is a small company. We don't have a lot of dudes on our ballistic development team, but the ones that are on there are passionate hunters, competitors, bench resters, PRS competitors. So the PRC line really found how can we take a cartridge that is living in the Wildcat world and getting this performance, whatever that performance may be, and make it available to everybody who doesn't has a custom rifle and wants to buy factory ammo. So you look at the PRC lines, the first two out of the gate were the 300 PRC and the 6.5 PRC. To pick on the 300 first, we had a lot of guys do this. 300 Win Mag. Okay. The throat geometry, which I mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
pretty dog shit, for lack of a better term, from a Sammy spec. Well, I'm going to get a custom reamer cut to these dimensions, the match dimensions, the 308 or 300 Win Mag match chamber, tactical reamer, if you will. And then I'm going to seat the bullet out past the Sammy spec. And I'm going to run pressure that pushes the pressure limit up just a little bit past Sammy spec. And I'm going to get a twist rate in my barrel that's faster than Sammy spec. And when I assemble it all together, man, it is so awesome. It's not even funny. Well, that's cool that you did that, Joe. But how do you, he's our assistant director of engineering, Joe Thielen. How do you make that available to everybody? Oh, Well, I'd take the belt off the case and I'd set the chamber geometry up like this, and I'd make the powder column this size, and I'd put this case taper in it, and I'd put a Sammy spec 8.5 twist, and then Ruger could make a rifle, and Kimber could make a rifle, and GA Precision could make a rifle, and 30 different gun builders could make a rifle, and we could make factory ammo that you can shoot a mile with. You can shoot further than a mile with this factory ammo and this factory rifle. So that's what the 300 PRC embodied. And the same thing was true with the 6.5 PRC. A lot of people for a lot of years, 6.5 284, 58 grains of Rotumbo, 140 grain match bullet seated to 3 inches even. That right there exceeds Sammy specs in every capacity, and send it out with a 1 8 twist barrel at 3,000 feet per second. Well, how do you do that for everybody? Well, you make a Magnum case head, and you make the 6.5 PRC. That's what you do. So really, that's what the 6.5, the 300, and the 7 PRC really were designed to do, is give custom performance for a factory rifle and factory ammo in an easy to shoot, inherently accurate cartridge platform.
Yeah. So these PRCs, are they? You've been in the game a long time. You've been shooting. You've been hunting. You are military. Is it kind of like me and the Coors Light of it's just like what I always like to go back to? Or have you fallen in love with certain calibers now because of what they do? Or do you treat it like a tool where it's like a flathead screwdriver doesn't do every job like a Phillips or a hammer, or you need certain tools for
Yeah.
the job?
Yeah. A little bit of both, honestly. I mean, the PRCs are, I mean, it's kind of like having kids, right? I love all my kids equally,
Yes.
right? So, like, the PRCs compared to the other cartridges that have been Sammy approved for decades, like, yeah, I love my kids, right? The PRCs. But there's also a little bit of a different aspect to it because it's not just the cartridge, it's the bullet diameters. Like, I love a 7 millimeter for hunting. And it just so happens that I love to shoot a 175 grain bullet at 3,000 feet per second. That to me is magic in the woods, no matter what you're hunting.
Yeah.
And to do that, the 7 PRC is just a tool. The 7 PRC gets it done. But I want that 175 grain bullet in an ELDX, and I want it going a certain speed. So the 7 PRC is just a tool that achieves that for me. So it's a little bit of both. I mean, I would be remiss if I said I didn't have a special soft spot for the 7 PRC, as that was one of my projects as a ballistic engineer. That was one of my personal cartridges that I really had a heavy hand in. But more than that, regardless of it being a 7 PRC, I really love 7 millimeter bullets as a whole for hunting.
Yeah. And I mean, there was a very popular stage in the olden days on 7 millimeter, and then they disappeared. Everything went 30 cal. And now with like the 6.5, and it's starting to be that resurgence back into the 7. It's pretty cool to see. Here's a question for you. First off, number one, will you sign some 7 millimeter bullets for me so that I can shoot them and say, this one's from Seth? Bam!
Yeah. You know what? I mean, I'll do that for you. I do that for myself, which is weird that my dad kind of taught me how to do when he taught me how to reload when I was a young age. He'd always, all right, these are going to be your 15 rounds you're going to load for hunting season this year. Pick a bullet. And I'd pick a bullet. That's the one. You put your initials on it. You just set it up. That's the one. And then when you load the one, you keep it separate. And when you go to load your gun for when you're going out in the field, that one goes in the chamber because that's the one.
Yeah.
And you picked it out. You chosen its destiny before you went hunting. So yeah, I could do that for you if you want.
You can choose the one for me.
Yeah, yes. I guess.
I love it. I love it. All right, so here is a question that I want to know. My son, so I'm a father of 3 boys, and ironically,
good luck.
Dude, thank you. The 3 amigos, man, my house is loud all the time. All the time.
Right.
My 3 amigos, when I became a father, I was like, Okay. I don't know when, but their first hunting rifle that I'm going to have them hunt with is a 300 Blackout.
Yeah.
Because at a young age, I want them to be able to shoot. Because now I was coming from the state of Washington where minimum caliber um, diameter was 243 or bigger. So in order to hunt big game, it had to be a 240. So like in Texas, you can shoot deer with uh, two,
22 cal.
yeah, 22 cal. So that all of a sudden makes you have to choose your weapon a lot differently as well. And so I bought a Ruger American Ranch rifle and a 16-inch barrel, and I put a suppressor on the end of it, and I have a fixed. Dude, I bought a scope. This is probably my very first rifle scope I ever bought on Amazon for like $60. It's a fixed 4-power Leapers. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
I sighted the scope in one time and it has never lost a zero.
Really?
It's crazy. So you guys were making 208 grain AMAX bullets because that is what I could find as subsonic ammo in a factory load, and I forget who was making it at the time. Um, Gorilla Ammunition out of Florida, I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, that's going to be, the ammo that I shoot out of it for subsonic. But I needed a hunting bullet because the AMAX at that slow, tell me if I'm wrong, it
Didn't
felt like
expand.
it's like a full metal jacket going through an animal, right? So it
Full
just,
metal Jangus. Yep.
yeah, nothing was happening. You'd shoot it and an animal would walk off and have a hole in it, but wasn't going to do anything. So um, I ended up choosing uh, Gorilla Ammunition made a all copper bullet that split out into fours. Um, but it was a 205 grain copper, 208 grain AMAX. I was like, oh, that's got to be close enough in grain that I'm not shooting this out, multiple hundred yards. We're looking maybe 125 and in.
Yeah.
That's got to be able to do the job. Well, my oldest son, at 105 yards, shot his first buck this year, his first deer with that 300 Blackout. And I freaking
Nice.
was so proud of that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is actually coming to fruition. Long story short, here I am being a Hornady fan, and I don't know what bullet I could choose that would replicate that in your lineup that would do the
Yeah.
same sort of damage at a subsonic speed and really hammer big game.
Yeah. Well, we have a whole line of bullets specifically for what you just mentioned. It's called the Sub X bullet. And we have a line of ammunition called the Subsonic line. And those bullets were designed to expand below the speed of sound. The cool thing with a 300 Blackout is the 300 Blackout is a 190 grain bullet. It exceeds the FBI's protocol for penetration.
Hmm.
So that doesn't automatically qualify a bullet for being a good hunting bullet, but in this case, it certainly does. That bullet will penetrate a car door, plywood, wallboard, heavy clothing, car windshield. And after it penetrates those barriers, it will still go 14 to 16 inches of penetration.
Really?
Remarkable. And so that's all below the speed of sound. They launch at the muzzle at 1050 feet per second. So those bullets specifically designed to operate in that reduced velocity window and yet expand. Now, remember, I mentioned that energy is just a correlation, of velocity. Velocity makes a bullet work. Well, these bullets were designed specifically to operate between 850 and 1050 feet per second. And that's between muzzle and 250 yards. These things absolutely expand and transfer energy. And 300 Blackout, 190 grain, sub X, that's the stuff.
Sweet. Okay, I'm gonna have to pick myself up some. When it comes to, because I love reloading 300 Blackout, hand loading
Yeah.
300 Blackout. If all you listeners are like, I want to get into hand loading, that is a great caliber because there's never case expansion.
Yeah.
You pull
Right.
out a case out of a bolt action 300 Blackout, and the case is cold. It's not
Yeah.
hot at all. Um, 8 grains of little gunpowder is what I
Yeah.
use, like minimal. So I'm gonna have to check that out. I think that's what my boys will be shooting come this fall.
Yeah,
Uh,
we have factory ammo. We offer that in a reloading component as well.
oh, great to know, dude. Seth, you are phenomenally knowledgeable in what you do. You love your
I
job,
just,
don't you?
you know what? I really do. And it's not so much of the job because marketing has its benefits and it's got some problems. I say problems. It's a cool job. I travel a lot. I've got young boys myself, got a wife, I got an acreage to take care of. The travel wears on you, but it's not the job position, it's the company. I love working for Hornady. It's a small company, and the owners, the president, and the vice president are still very active in the company, and they let you do what you want. If you got a good, badass idea for a product, cool, make it happen,
Yeah.
get after it. Like, there's not a whole lot of red tape. And when you work in that environment, every day I bring guns into work to, to help develop stuff, and everybody's at the door. Oh, Seth, what'd you bring in today? Not like, oh my gosh, somebody's coming to the door with a gun. It's a very different culture, and that culture, I love coming to work. It's just awesome because of the environment, the small family owned, hyper competitive environment where everybody that works there is an end user of the product.
Yeah.
So that's where you get this cool product design is people are just straight up using it.
Dude, that's awesome. And right, the end user. Like you go to work, but you're like, I'm also a user of this product. I can get behind it. It's a lot easier to sell something when you believe in it, right? I believe
Dude,
in
the
my
7
mission.
PRC is that specifically. The whole reason I started development on the 7 PRC with a couple of others on our team because I wanted brass. I needed to get the brass plant to make some brass so I could chamber my rifle. And oh yeah, now it's a semi-approved cartridge and people are making guns. Great. But it was very selfish. I just wanted it for me.
Dude, that is awesome. What have you shot with your 7 PRC?
Not a ton yet. I'm about to. So with the 7 PRC, I've shot a 200-inch mule deer and like a mid 160s mule deer and a ton of steel.
Yeah.
A ton of steel. But I think I've only killed the 2 animals with it so far, which is pretty sad considering I had such a heavy hand in the development.
Well, all in due time, right? It'll come.
Well, I go to Africa in June and I plan to kill everything that that continent has to offer with the 7
Yes.
PRC.
Yes. Okay, so the 7 PRC, in case people are wondering still, because we really want to hammer this. Everyone loves the. I don't like to speak in generals. Please excuse me on that.
Yeah.
There's this concept of Magnum cartridges. If it's not a Magnum, I can't shoot big game, right? I can't go
Yeah.
shoot a moose with not a Magnum cartridge, or I can't go to Africa with this or whatever.
Right.
So that 7 PRC to you is a Magnum, just not titled that, or
Yeah.
what would you classify it
Well,
as?
it's definitely a Magnum. It is a standard length action, which most people would consider a long action, but it's a standard length action, 3.340 overall length, same length as a 300 Win Mag, for example. It has a Magnum diameter case head, no belt, and it achieves ballistics like a Magnum.
Yeah.
It just does it very efficiently and very accurately. And it just, man, it's a sweetheart. 30% less recoil than a 300 PRC, 28% less recoil than a 28 Nosler, 28% less recoil than a 300 Win Mag. So significantly less recoil, but a flatter trajectory and less wind drift and more velocity on target at virtually every range than every other cartridge out there.
It
I mean, it just wins.
it's kind of like the one ring to rule them all. If
Yeah.
yeah. Have you shot any small game with it?
I've shot a prairie dog. Yeah, slightly overkill. uh, uh, I haven't shot any coyotes with it, although I will because every hunt turns into a coyote hunt as soon
Yes.
as you see a coyote.
Yes. I'm
So
that
that's on my,
100%.
yeah, it's on my thing to do list. But like I said, I hunted mule deer with it twice. I've been on several hunts with the cartridge, but have not connected. I had a elk tag, a moose tag, and a bear tag. All of 3 were unsuccessful just because we didn't find the game we were after. But I've seen moose get killed with it. I've seen black bears get killed with it. There's going to be some grizzly bears taken with it here. I mean, it's a very capable cartridge.
So that's what I was going to ask next. Is that going to be a grizzly bear cartridge? I mean, ultimately, anything could be, depending on how many times you want to shoot it. But yeah, that is ideally what you would carry.
Yeah, so ideally, probably not. If I had my druthers, I would probably take a big 30 or bigger, simply out of posterity. But I've got a good friend of mine, an outdoor writer. He's going on a grizzly bear hunt in 2 days. He leaves, and he's taking a 375 H&H and a 300 PRC. His guide, when he contacted his guide was like, yeah, 7 mag will be just fine. His guide carries a 7 mag and has killed dozens of bears in his life with a 7 mag. Yeah. So the 7 PRC, more than capable, but when you're going on a specific endeavor simply to shoot a brown bear and you've got thousands of dollars likely wrapped up into it, take the big stick.
Yep.
As Theodore Roosevelt would say, just take the big stick. But no, it'll certainly do it. And with the right bullet selection, you can have confidence in it.
Yeah. The H&H, baby. The 375. Dude.
It's such a romanticized cartridge. You can't say no to it.
Would you get it in what the Ruger Tropical? Is that what it's called? The
Safari?
Safari, that's what it is. The Ruger Safari. And the H&H.
I think this one is I can't remember exactly. I think he's got a Winchester Model 70 that he built himself, chambered himself. It was a very cool cartridge, very cool gun that he built a decade ago and was like, oh, I'm going to take this on a brown bear hunt one day, and never thought he would actually go. And then Saturn blocked Jupiter, and he finally got funds aligned and this super discounted deal on a hunt so he could finally go. So he's taking the 375.
Yes. All right, that's it. I'm sold, man. I wish ammunition didn't cost so much. You know what I mean? Like,
dude, that's true.
Like, can we just get it to be cheaper? Because I got a lot of shooting I want to do, and like, now I just moved to Texas, right? So I'm down here.
God's country,
dude. Yes, I'm going on a turkey hunt this weekend. But you know what I'm doing after I kill a turkey? I'm hog hunting. I'm predator hunting. And I'm going to go smash on some animals with the thermals. And I want to be able to just shoot over and over and over. And everything costs money. I'm like, come on, baby.
Yeah. Like, that's crazy. We've absorbed Hornady. I say we. Hornady has absorbed several price increases over the last couple of years. The copper material price and the lead material price hit an all-time high like a year and a half ago. And then just, it's like the movie Spinal Tap. It's just sustained. You just hear it. It's just sustained.
Yeah.
And it sustained that all-time high indefinitely. So there has been some price increases on the manufacturing of ammo. The big fly in the ointment is the retailer. The retailer can kind of do what they want. We sell the ammo to our distributor. Distributor sells it to the retailer. Those are all fixed prices relatively. And then the retailer, if they want to mark it up because people will pay it, they're going to mark it up. So some of that's artificial.
Okay, so that was what I was going to ask next, is because I went in knowing that I am going to be getting a gun in 7 PRC. I'm also not a fan of having, I believe in having 1,000 rounds. If you have a gun in a certain caliber, you need to have 1,000 rounds of it because you want to be able to shoot it. You want to get good at it, and it's good to have.
Train with it.
Yeah, like all that. Well, all of a sudden I started looking at 7 PRC ammo. I was like, $58 a box of 20. Ouch, man. That digs into you quickly. However, you do what you got to do. So I'm going to have to talk to my retailers. Be like, come on, fellas. Well,
$58, to be honest with you, when you look at a Magnum cartridge, you look at 68 grains of powder, the stick of brass, the bullet, the sizes. I would say that's a pretty fair price for a Magnum cartridge, $58 a box. You look at someone like 28 Nosler, for example,
Yeah.
which retails for like $95 to $100 a box.
Does it really? Man, I don't
Yeah,
shoot
it's
Nosler, so that
right. Well, not to knock on Nosler. John Nosler and Jason Hornady are friends. They hunt together on occasion. Like, we got a good relationship with those guys. But I just mean that cartridge as a whole, it chews up a lot of powder. And when you put a lot of powder in a cartridge, it unfortunately costs a little bit of money.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, I'm going to be on the lookout for the Sub X 190 grain.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to resight in my rifle though. That fixed 4-power baby. I don't know what at 150 and in on that slow of uh, speed. How much
Yeah.
change is there between like a 190 grain bullet and a 205?
In raw ballistics, probably not that much. But the part that you can't control is barrels have attitude,
Yeah.
and that attitude is determined a lot by the propellant burned. There's some sort of weird witchy relationship between barrel and propellant that creates accuracy. That's why, like Hodgdon's Varget, for example, if you got a cartridge that you can put Varget in, put Varget in it. It's going to be accurate. It just works. This is the chemistry. So some propellants produce generally better accuracy than others and point of impact. So it's hard saying from a raw ballistic standpoint, say 100 grain bullet or 190 versus 205 and just raw gravity drop and different in velocity, not much. But the propellant, like I said, that barrel has attitude and that propellant will change some things.
Awesome. Okay, good to know. All right, last question. We're going to wrap this bad boy up in regards to all this because
Yeah.
I want to honor your time and say thank you for coming and joining. 6mm arc. There are so many different things that are coming out. You got like 6.8 Western, you got 6.5 Grendel, you got 6mm arc. What is all this stuff? What's going on in the world? This is what, carbine length or what's happening?
Yeah. So the 6 arc is really cool because it's so small. It's super small. The reason the 6 arc was designed was we have a pretty good relationship with some very notable groups within the Department of Defense. And we're not at liberty to say which specific groups those are, but let's just say the tip of the spear, right? Very elite groups. And a lot of them field the 300 PRC. And in that development process, there was a lot of talk, right? Like, oh, wow, you guys developed the 300 PRC. You guys kind of know what's going on. Here's what we feel is a problem. What would you guys do? Was the long and short of it. And the problem for them was we've got snipers, we've got assaulters, we've got general, GPOP type elite operators carrying AR-10s with 308 Winchesters with an 18-inch or a 16-inch barrel, plus a suppressor, the heavy ammo. We're doing CQB. We're doing Overwatch. We're doing sniper missions. Is the 308 Winchester the best option for us? What would you guys do? And our senior ballistician and the group within the department, what we call our ballistics development group, said, hey, you really might want to consider like something like a 6.5 Grendel. Just check it out. We could do something better, but you might want to look into it. So they looked into it. And they said, wow, the 6.5 Grendel actually looks pretty good. What would you guys do? And we said, well, this is what we would do. We would take the 6.5 Grendel, we'd neck it down to 6mm, we'd push that shoulder back, we'd run 105 to 110 grain bullets, and you would have better hit probability than your 308. You'd be able to carry significantly more ammo at the same weight as 308 Winchester, and you'd be able to run a 2-inch longer barrel than a 308 Winchester, but still have the same length of platform as your AR-10. So you'd have more velocity. So we designed the cartridge real quick for them and put pencil to paper, ran out, shot it, put it in use in the field. And the reality is the 6mm arc gave that operator more ammo, better hit percentage, less drop due to gravity, less wind deflection, and better terminal performance at 880 meters and in than the 308 Winchester. and that goes over. And so at that point, they adopted it. The Department of Defense had on contract the 6 millimeter arc. And then they asked us to introduce it to Sammy. So we introduced it to Sammy. So now you have a cartridge that super low recoil, very efficient, shoots those super efficient 6 millimeter bullets at a moderate velocity with low recoil, super amazing barrel life. And so a lot of us, me personally, it's my PRS gun, my PRS rifle, the 6 millimeter arc. It's great for thermal hunting. It's great for varmint hunting, great for deer and antelope hunting in a bolt action. And it was really designed for that gas operated platform, for that AR-15 style platform. So in a nutshell, that's the 6 millimeter arc.
Interesting. Okay, so when it comes to these tests, that the data,
Yeah.
I'm on your guys' website right now. I have the 6 arc pulled up, and it gives all this data, and it says test barrel, 24 inches. Why do you guys do that if that's not what you're making it for? Why does that, or like, why does that? Is that Sammy specs?
Yeah. So Sammy, depending on what the cartridge is and what it's kind of designed for, you will introduce it with a specific barrel length. And that's just a standardization process, just to help make sure everything is on an even playing field. And so most cartridges are a 24-inch Sammy test barrel.
Okay. So if I'm getting an arc this coming fall and I want to hunt with it, because hunting with the AR-15 is badass. like
Yeah.
come on now. Um what barrel length do I need? 18-inch is what you said?
You can go as short as 14. Personally, a lot of us here at Hornady are running 18s on the gas gun. My match rifle is a 26-inch bolt gun. I have a 22-inch bolt gun and then the 18-inch gas gun. So if you're running a gas gun, personally, I'd recommend the 18. You get good velocity. It's not so long when you put the suppressor on it. And again, velocity makes bullets work.
Okay. Are those barrels starting to become a lot more available? Have you guys pushed those out to a lot of
Oh, God.
manufacturers?
There's one really prominent barrel manufacturer in the industry that makes carbon fiber barrels, and they produced more 6 millimeter arc AR-15 barrels than they did 223 Remington barrels in the year 2022.
Really?
So, yeah, 6 millimeter arc is out there. It's here to stay. Yeah, it's blowing up.
Okay. Man, I'm going to be going to the store this week and I'm going to be taking a look, seeing what I can find. I always like, even if I don't have the chambering yet, I like to buy the ammo because it's like, okay, well, I got the ammo. Now I got to make sure I get the gun. Time to go buy a barrel.
Yeah. Well, and with a Hornady designed cartridge, when we designed the chamber, factory ammo and factory rifles just produce good accuracy. It's just simple as that. So you can buy the ammo, rest assured it's going to shoot well.
Yeah. Brother, thank you so much. Is there anything I'm not asking or leaving on the table that you feel like the listeners need to know about ammunition and shooting and hunting?
Well, I'm honestly, I'm sure there's a ton. I could talk about this till the cows come home because it's what I do in my personal life. It's what I do for fun. It's what I do as a hobby, and it's what I do professionally. So I could talk about it forever and ever and ever. So I'm sure there's something that I would like to talk about, but honestly, this was a pretty good swath. And as your listeners have questions, comments, concerns, that they reach out to you, please get them to me specifically. And I'd be happy to answer them. Or if we need to do another podcast about a topic that's a little more specific, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I think that would be very important to have. Once you're not running around so much, when is your non-busy season? Because it seems like summer's PRS, fall is hunting, winter show season. Like, when is it not busy for you?
So the year starts off in January. That's trade shows, January, February. March and April are pretty slow. And then May, June, July, you've got, if you're going to go to Africa, that's when you go to Africa because it's winter over there. You've got all the predator seasons that happen in March. So we do a lot of coyote hunting and coyote calling. Then in the summer, you've got prairie dogs. Summer's not super busy, but you got all the PRS matches, NRL hunter matches, which I'm a big fan of. Then in late August, early September, you roll into hunting season. And so we're hunting clear till January, and then January starts trade show season all over again. So from February, March time frame is generally the slow season, quote unquote slow season, into April a little bit. But
Yeah.
it's all relative, man. You know the drill. You're a parent. Wrestling season, baseball, football, it's pandemonium. I love it.
100%. 100%. Brother, thank you so much for being on this show. Last question for you. What has hunting done for you?
Oh boy. Well, in large scale, it's provided a way of life, right? I grew up just doing it for fun. My dad did it for fun, right? And it was always fun, and it still is fun. But for me, it has shaped my family's life. When I look at my family now, not my parents, but my wife and my two kids and our acreage and everything that I have, I owe to hunting. Not only was it a passion of mine growing up and something that I looked forward to. You were an athlete, right? When you're young, you're 13, 14, 15, through high school, you've got football season, and then it's wrestling or basketball, and then it's track, and then I play baseball in the summer. It was constant, but I always looked forward to making that time to go hunting. So it was always fun. But then now as an adult and working in the industry, it literally built my home, bought my vehicles, supports my wife, supports my kids, puts food in the refrigerator, everything. I owe everything to hunting. And I'm a passionate match shooter, and I guess you could say some of it's owed to that as well. But I shoot matches competitively so I could become a better hunter. And I've always been about that. When I started shooting competitively in 2013, how can this directly impact me as a hunter?
Right.
So for me, it's done everything. And tangential kind of the conversation with a little bit of time in service and a little bit of time overseas, it was really paramount in that transitionary period from coming home from deployment and subsequently getting out of the military and transitioning back into what I would call a normal life. The connection with the outdoors really did a lot for me and so many others in that frame of time. And like I said, now it's a job, it's a passion, it's a life. I owe so much to the idea of hunting and the conservation aspect of hunting. I can't even describe it.
Oh man. Well, the next time we get you on, we'll dive into the more awesome topics, but I want to hear your story. I want to hear you, Seth, not just represent Hornady in the ammo, but representing hunting in general and you and the legacy in which you are getting to hold from your father now to you being a dad and at some
Yeah,
point passing it on to your kids. So that's the stuff I really love. Brother, thank you so much for coming on, being a guest. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. Thank you for your service to this country and everything that
absolutely.
you did. I really want to honor you with that. Guys, if you like this episode, share and share and share. Knowledge is power, and the more we can push out this knowledge and information, the better it is. I've always been a Hornady fan. Hopefully you are as well after this episode. You can go to Hornady.com and check out all the different stuff that we were talking about today. If you like to support the show and the mission, go ahead and support those sponsors that help us. Everything helps. Use those discount codes. Guys, be blessed. Remember that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure, and that mentorship is conservation. I'm Johnny Mack for Seth. Be blessed, everybody. And as always, freedom on. Stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.